Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Tonya Haigh. Tonya is a rural sociology research specialist with the National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Tonya's research focuses on the adaptive capacity of agricultural producers and others to cope with drought. She has worked with ranchers, advisors, and researchers to develop the Managing Drought Risk on the Ranch website and has provided social science expertise to the development of climate decision support tools for Corn Belt producers and specialty crop growers. So Tonya, take it away.
Great, thank you. Before I share my screen, I am going to drop a URL into the chat so that I don't forget. So if you want to click on that and play around while I'm talking, that is just fine. I am going to, let's see if I can minimize everything. There we go. I'm going to attempt to do this live on a new dashboard website, so we'll see how it goes. I really appreciate the opportunity, Sky, to be able to be part of this webinar, to share a new monitoring dashboard with you, to hear some feedback. As Sky said, I've worked with the National Drought Mitigation Center for a little over 12 years. Much of that has been working on developing resources for ranchers who are managing drought. And we talk a lot about planned, proactive decision-making. And to do that successfully really requires not only that ranchers are thinking ahead about the drought-related decisions that need to be made, whether it's moving animals between pastures or purchasing supplemental forage, but it really also requires what seems to be kind of a magic ball of knowing when drought is truly becoming a concern and identifying, having in your mind the conditions that are going to trigger the actions that need to be taken. And that can be pretty tricky and a little overwhelming for producers. Knowing when drought decisions should be made is really difficult. Drought's onset can be difficult to detect. And honestly, it can be overwhelming to look through the wealth of monitoring information that is out there and to know what's appropriate for your situation and to know how to use it effectively in decision making. And so the development of this ranch drought monitoring dashboard, which I'm going to try to just make this a little bigger here, sorry, so you can see a little better. I hope that helps. There we go. The development of this dashboard, which has been a cooperative effort, a collaborative effort between the National Drought Mitigation Center and the USDA climate hubs, the NRCS, area extension specialists have really all been very helpful in this. This dashboard is intended to make the process a little easier by identifying and addressing specific monitoring questions that ranchers may have when they're trying to make decisions about drought. So, so again, the URL is in the chat. Please feel free to play around while I talk through it. You can see the dashboard is organized around 5 questions that, that we think helps address the monitoring needs of ranchers in making decisions. And those questions are, what is my current drought situation? And that's the question we usually think about when we're thinking about monitoring. How does this year compare to last year? What can I expect for forage production this year? And that's going to bring us back to GrassCast and some other tools. Could I still get enough precipitation to change the forage production expectations? That's the magic question everybody wants answers to. And then what are my options for drought management? And so I'm going to click my way through these questions and kind of give you a little tour, about to show off what's in the dashboard right now. And then I'm really interested in hearing some feedback from you all. So here we are under what's my current situation. This area really contains a lot of information and it's displayed in a map of layers. Right now you're seeing the US Drought Monitor as a default. You can see current drought conditions. You can see outlooks on this map. You can see some of the forage production and drought stress tools that Julie also mentioned. You can see some reports of on-the-ground impacts of drought, and you can add some base layers like counties or USDA regions. You can zoom in, you can zoom out. In this map, I'll kind of zoom into our region a little bit more and maybe just walk through a few things. Obviously, you know, you're going to open up each area with the plus button, and then also open up an area to read more, and then there will be some drop down boxes to give you choices. So if we want to look at precipitation, let's say the precipitation that we've seen over the last 30 days in the region, we can do that by clicking on the precipitation compared to normal tab. And we can take a look at that and say, hey, that's great. We've gotten some precipitation. But how does that compare to what we normally would see over the last 30 days normally at this time of year? Well, that doesn't look so good, unfortunately. So there are lots of other options. You can look at the last 60 days, 90 days, year to date. You could go back and start with the water year starting October 1, if that's helpful. And really use this to just kind of get a handle on where things are at right now. Another way to look at drought, you might be interested in on the ground CocoRa's reports or the drought condition monitoring reports. If you open these up, there's actually, you can go to the CocoRa's site to get more information. But if you're just looking for some general information of what are people reporting as far as dry or wet conditions, that's a nice layer to check. Julie also talked about how it's important then to not only consider current drought status, but what are our outlooks? What are we looking, what kind of conditions are we looking at over the next, here we can look at the 6 to 10 day outlook, 8 to 14 day, monthly, or the next 3 months. And as Julie did, I'm going to check on them on the 1 month precipitation outlook for the region. And we can see that part of the region seems to be showing equal chances of wet or dry, and part of the region is showing, you know, maybe a little higher probability of being dry. And so that might give us a sense of how optimistic or pessimistic we might be over the next the next month or so. And then, as Julie pointed out, some folks it might find it more helpful to look at vegetation stress, even more so than precipitation. And so you can layer in, and all of these layers that I'm adding, you can change the transparency of them if you'd like to look at some things together. But again, here's the vegetation drought response index, where you can see some drought stress happening in rangelands right now, and then also be able to see in this context. Let's see if I need to add we're looking at the Great Plains here. We can add the grass cast layer. So using this dashboard, you can look at some of this information in the context of other information that might be valuable to you. And we're going to come back and talk about grass cast a little bit more. So those are some of the things that you can do under what is my current drought situation, again, which is what a lot of people think about when we're talking about monitoring. But some of these other questions seem to come up a lot with ranchers and other rangeland and natural resource managers as well. And one of those questions is, okay, well, how does this year compare to last year or some other time period that's important to me? So you can click on that question and you can go to this area. It'll take you to this area on the page called How Does This Year Compare to Last Year? And this uses the US Drought Monitor to let you compare 2 times, two time periods or 2 weeks, basically. It's set up as a default to show you the current US Drought Monitor on the left, and then 1 year ago today on the right. So you can see New Mexico's map this week, and 1 year ago. But you can also use the buttons down here to look at other time periods as well. And that might help a rangeland manager just be thinking, okay, well, what was I doing a year ago? What was I thinking about? Based on these conditions, what should I be thinking about differently? And that seems to be a useful communication and scenario planning bit of information. So we just had this great presentation on GrassCast, and that really gets at this question of, okay, well, there's all this precipitation information. How does that translate into my actual forage production for the year? And I think this is one area that we've really seen some great movement forward in some tools that are really useful to help answer those questions. And so even though we provide the information on that as a layer on the map, we also, under this part of the dashboard, provide a visual so you can see the above normal, near normal, and below normal precipitation scenarios. You can click on it to go to the GrassCast website that Julie kind of walked through, and of course, and then find a lot more information. And then in this area, there are also some other resources that have been developed in a few other states. And if you're in one of these states, it might be really helpful to compare a couple of the forage forecast tools and see what different types of information are telling you, and use that in thinking about scenario planning. So just a couple more areas. Again, that big question of, okay, well, is there a chance I could still get enough precipitation and change my expectations? And this is an area that we're really working to develop more. I think there's some new tools that are being developed that will be really helpful here. But this really comes down to two questions. One is, where are we at in the year? And where are we at in the year compared to when we get the precipitation that's actually going to grow forage? And in the Southwest region, as Julie pointed out, there's sort of there's a spring forage production season and a summer forage production season. In the northern and central plains, there's been a lot of research on the months of April, May, and June being the months that those are the months that the precipitation really grows the forage. So if a producer gets to the end of June and we're still looking at a precipitation deficit, there's really no reason to wait until July or August to see if we get precipitation, because precipitation that comes in those months really isn't having the same effect to produce forage. And so these are just some helpful information for starting to think about, okay, well, when do I need to stop waiting? When do I really need to think about taking action? For some folks, it's helpful to think about the seasonality of precipitation. So we have included a couple of tools here. One is just a simple seasonal precipitation viewer that you can view for your region. One is the SPI Explorer that's out of the University of Arizona extension. And if you're familiar with SPI, I think this is a really great tool for helping to explore how many inches of precipitation might actually be expected under those below normal, near normal, and above normal outlooks during specific seasons. What does that translate into for inches of precipitation? It also has a really neat aspect where you can explore the likelihood of actually transitioning between dry conditions and wet conditions between specific seasons. And that's all based on historic climatological data. So that might be a tool that is helpful for exploring and thinking about and monitoring. And then the very last question that we use to organize this dashboard is, what are my options for drought management? And this isn't so much a monitoring question, but it is a question that tends to come up when we're talking about monitoring. So it seemed like a nice place to just link to some resources here. So we link to some tools that we've identified, like the Haigh exchange that may be available in your state. We link to a resource called the Drought Management Strategy Library, where you might go in and say, I'm looking for some grazing management ideas during drought. Let's see what comes up in this collection of very much extension oriented type resources, other guides and resources and fact sheets like that, that may be helpful in thinking through through management options. You can find resources by state. This is the link I just discovered is not working, so we'll get that fixed tomorrow. Something that might be helpful is we actually have a link to some sample drought plans. And these are examples of drought plans with ranchers who worked with us on the Managing Drought Risk on the Ranch website. And we're always looking to expand the list of examples and stories that we can share. So if there's some in this region, we would love to work with you to add to this list. But sometimes it's nice to see what are other managers paying attention to and how are they making decisions, as well as some general guidance. So again, I want to acknowledge the funding and collaborative support of the USDA on this tool. I'm going to go back to these top set of 5 questions again. Sky's going to pull up a poll for me. These were questions that were developed working with ranchers in the Great Plains, but also some experts throughout the Southwest region. And I'm really interested in, from your perspective, do these guiding questions address what you would like to know about the status of drought, or are we missing important questions that should be on the list? And so if you have an opinion on that, we'd love to see it in the poll right here. And while you're doing that, then I also want to point out this provide feedback button. So when you go in and you're playing around, and you see and you think, well, this is great, but here's actually an information source that I find really useful. I wish it would be added to this. Use that provide feedback button to let us know. Or I think the information that you have here is a little different than my situation. Please use the provide feedback button to let us know. I don't know if you can see over the poll here or not, but this is, you click on it, it just takes you to a very simple form to provide your feedback. And if you want to provide your email address and name so we can follow up, that's great. I'll also happily stick my, my email address in the chat, and I look forward to hearing your questions and discussion later on.